Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Council meeting. We have apologies for absence.
So I was going to say, I think Councillor Russell and Johnson are both representing the Council at the SCUC Women's Conference, so I would have thought their apologies would be in.
Thank you. Order of business. Excuse me, could you put your microphone on, please?
Yeah, item 9 on the agenda, which is the report on the financial strategy. There was to be an appendix, which is a letter from the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Employment and Sustainable Growth, but unfortunately was originally omitted. That has since been distributed to all elected members. The other thing to mention is that we have just received as far as item 6B on the agenda, which is a notice of motion by Councillor Thompson, countersigned by Councillor De Frank. We have received an amendment to that motion, which can be distributed at the time.
Okay. Are there any declarations of interest? If not, you can make them throughout the afternoon. Thank you. We have minutes of meetings for approval. Midlothian Council on the 23rd of September 2014. Approved. Thank you. For noting and consideration, the Cabinet meeting of the 26th of August and the second one on the 26th of August 2014. Planning Committee, 27th of May 2014. General Purposes Committee, 17th of June and the 19th of August. Local Review Body, 2nd of September 2014. Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee, 2nd of September 2014, 3rd of September, and the second one, the 3rd of September. The Audit Committee, 28th of October 2014. Okay. Item 5, question to the Leader of the Council.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I've received a question on planning appeals. I'll be relatively brief in my response to this just now. Essentially, every year there are a number of appeals on a number of different issues. In 2010 there were 9, 2011 15, 2012 there were 8, 2013 5, and 2014 7 appeals. I think that the detail behind some of these and the costs around that, I would actually ask the Director to provide additional information on that in due course, because I think it will take a bit of work to pull some of that together on the costings. But clearly it is a right of applicants to be able to do this, but there is a financial cost to the Council where it does happen. So further information will follow in due course.
Thank you. Item 6A, a notice of motion by Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Provost. I take great delight in moving this motion because it's David Peacock. I knew him, I remember when he was born. I knew him all my life. He was born and brought up in Danderhall. His father worked at Buckton Hall Colliery, and he's been a credit to the community at Bulls, and I'm quite sure the Council they know that through the Hall of Fame he's won other big tournaments, like the World Champions, where the Council's recognised them. But on this occasion, I sometimes wonder if Danderhall's in Midlothian. And the reason I'm saying that is when I asked, going back for the baton, and I knew David was selected, I think he was the only one, by the way, in the Hale County of Midlothian, selected to represent Scotland. They didn't see fit to take the baton to Danderhall, but for by that, he went on to win gold medal in the Commonwealth Games, not just represent his country, but playing in his home country and winning the gold medal. I ken how high he is, he's chuffed to bits. And in the last edition of the Midlothian News, there was no mention of David winning the gold medal. All I seen was Brian Cox with baton at Roseland Chapel, and they mentioned David Peacock winning the gold medal. And I've made jokes in the past to some of the other councillors where they got the baton, Danderhall got the gold medal. But I think as a council, and I know he's been recognised for his achievements in the past, but this is the first time he's ever won a gold medal at a major Commonwealth Games, and I think the council should recognise that by at least a letter to him, congratulate him on his success as the only one from Midlothian that did win a gold medal.
I'll take responsibility for that, Councillor, that an oversight on my part that we didn't recognise him, but I'll make sure we do recognise him. Okay, I have a seconder for the motion, Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, Provost, with Councillor Russell being away to TC, I would like to formally second that. I think Midlothian has a proud history of being represented well in all these areas in Commonwealth Games and the Olympic Games and that. And I think we have created some and produced some of the best athletes that this country has seen. And I think we have every right to be proud of that history. I think David's a guy who's absolutely outstanding. Is known to most people in all sporting circles, not just in the bowling circles, but he's known to people throughout the sport and leisure industry. I think we really should all join together to actually congratulate him on yet a further fantastic achievement, and a great kudo for his hometown of Danderhall.
Yep, I have to say that I had the pleasure of meeting him at the baton, really, but I will make sure I'll make amends to that, and we get him in here and congratulate him properly. Councillor Bryant.
I would just like to echo my colleagues across the room. It's a disgrace that Danderhall didn't have the baton, but at least we got the gold medal, as Alex said. I don't know if you realise how much training goes into winning a gold medal. It's quite a thing, and also to perform under such intense scrutiny, TV cameras and crowds, is something indeed to be proud of.
Okay. Move to item 6B, a motion by Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Provost. Obviously, I think there's an amendment working its way around. If I could maybe just have a moment to see it prior to starting my contribution. It might, see if it's changing what I'm about to say. Okay, I'll maybe come back to the amendment in a minute. I think, first and foremost, I'm sure what we can all agree on, and I assume from the amendment, it not looking to change the text of the original, that we can all agree with the principle that actually the write-off of the debt is finally a sort of let's lay at rest the end of the poll tax for good, a legacy that none of us are happy that's still around today. I think the suggestion from some in the period shortly after the referendum to use electoral roll to now chase people for this debt that's more than 20 years old was deeply unfortunate, because we saw across both sides of the campaign sort of the activation and enthusiasm that people have picked up, and the sort of the real engagement with a political process for many people who had never engaged before. That has to be a good thing, and from that point of view, I'm certainly strongly of the opinion that it's not appropriate for us to use electoral records to chase this sort of debt that's as decades old. I think it is certainly worth noting that while the 8 million total figure is talked about, actually the sort of the amount that we could legally, legitimately still pursue is far, far less than that. There are summary warrants that would have been renewed a number of years ago, and it's only those that you could actually still pursue. So while the 8 million is the total, the actual amount we could really genuinely try to get is where there's an ongoing payment record, and that actually is something just over £1 million. So it is quite a significant difference to the total outstanding. Apart from that, this debt has already been written off by this council. It's been provided for in our bad debt provision for a number of years now, as far as I can tell. So it's not that we're suddenly writing off a debt that's not there anymore. There is, yes, some of it still dripping in, and it is very much a drip, because for all the headlines about the massive amounts that are outstanding, the amount that's actually collected annually across the whole of Scotland is only something like £400,000. It's tiny amounts, and in fact, I got a comment from a colleague in another council where they actually collected £29 last year in outstanding poll tax debts. I mean, the cost to administer the system to do that clearly outweighs anything that can be brought in. I think I can see where the sentiment behind the amendment's coming from, to say, yes, give us more money. We would all love to see more money. The Scottish Government are talking about legislation to come in that will reimburse councils at a rate equivalent to the collections that are currently being made, which I think sounds perfectly reasonable. I think to ask for anything over and above that, well, I think that's unrealistic, especially given that the movers of the amendment were the administration who would have written off the bad debt at the time they did that, which I think was the right thing to do, I would add. So from that basis, I don't think there is a need for us to accept the amendment, but simply welcome the fact that the Government is now taking action on this, and that we can move forward and finally lay to rest the legacy of the poll tax.
Thank you. Councillor Brink.
The poll tax was monstrous taxation, and it was very stupidly conceived. If you have a debt that is more than 6 years and there has not been any information with the debtor about this debt being to be honoured, the debt is timed out. So a lot of those people that have not been in communication, had not received any communication from the council, had no obligation to pay for it. And I don't know where the 20 years comes from. If the council has failed to remind people that this debt is outstanding and they haven't communicated with them, then that debt after 6 years is timed out. Maybe the legal counsel could confirm that with us.
Councillor Montgomery, would you? You go.
So, really, just to clarify, the statement made by the leader is correct. Where we have taken warrants out against people, these warrants remain live, and that debt is not prescribed because the council has taken court action to recover. Where the council hasn't been able to take out any such warrants, then, given the passage of time, these debts will have prescribed. So the amount outstanding also might be at 8 million. The amount that legally can be recovered as a maximum is nearer 1 million, and as a practical amount, I wouldn't like to speculate on how much of that 1 million is actually recoverable.
Councillor Montgomery, you could clear to move your...
Thanks, Provost. Well, 1 million, I checked with our finance people before I drafted the amendment up, and 8 million was the figure I was given, so even if it was 1 million, it's still a hell of a lot of money. And I think, you know, you can dress this up any way you want. This was actually seen as basically as a bribe to get people to vote yes in the referendum campaign, on the basis that if they... Well, I didn't listen anybody else was speaking, and if you let me finish, you'll maybe not find it all that funny. The referendum was a serious business, and the people who were actually on the register were actually, the men of them that came back on were voting yes. I mean, I remember back at the time of the poll tax, I was actually a councillor, and so was Councillor Imrie, who's seconded it, so I've got first-hand knowledge of how the thing actually worked. And as a regional council, we were actually responsible for trying to collect the poll tax, something we didn't agree with, but were legally bound to do so. I mean, as far as taxation is concerned, it's never been a popular thing. You go back to the Romans, you go back to Robin Hood and King Richard, who were raising money to fight the Crusades. We raised it to fight in Iraq at a national level, so sometimes things don't really change. But for the purposes of today's meeting, I mean, the poll tax was really to pay for council services. It was brought in 1989, even though there was mass opposition in Scotland, and we were seen as the the trial run, if you want, or the dummy run, before it was actually introduced in England. And it was designed by the Thatcher government to help the rich in the bigger houses and the mansions while punishing working class families. If you actually looked at it in simple terms, and the reason I'm doing this because a lot of folk really didn't know what the poll tax was because they weren't living in that era. In simple terms, if you lived alone in a large house or a massive house, you paid 1 poll tax contribution. If you're a working class family with a family of 3, you paid 4 or 5 times that, which is absolutely morally and criminally wrong. So to set the background of the non-payment campaign, it was made up of a wide range of the population, although it was a minority, and for various reasons, and the ones who are benefiting from this motion deliberately kept themselves off the electoral register and then deliberately put themselves back on at the behest of the Yes campaign with the promise of no action against the non-payment after the referendum. And that's actually morally wrong. The motion for Councillors Thompson and Devine is a result of buying yes votes, and if the SNP administration were serious about non-collection against deliberate non-payers, why did they wait 7 years to do it? You've had 7 years as an administration at Holyrood to actually change that legislation. And don't be fooled by this. This was actually buying votes for the referendum. At the time of fighting against the poll tax, it was really the sort of trot parties, which was kind of Tommy Sheridan and the Scottish Socialist Party and people like that were leading the charge in many ways. And they were at the forefront, and while there were some odd bedfellows, it beggars belief that the self-appointed spokesperson for every ultra-left of centre, Mr Sheridan, is now in partnership with people like Councillor Devine over not paying your poll tax bill. And I think it's actually strange days indeed. And it was quite a conglomeration that was actually involved in the non-payment campaign. Remember at Lothian Region we were actually setting the poll tax, one of the first poll tax meeting that we had to actually set the budget. And there was a demonstration outside in St Giles. There was a couple of hundred there, and they were banging drums and playing different things and all the rest of it. And they eventually invaded the council chamber, and the meeting got suspended for about an hour or so till we cleared them out. And I remember, when I was saying about some strange bedfellows, there was a guy standing in front of my desk, and he was actually trying to climb onto it, and I explained to him it maybe be better if he didn't. And he didn't, to be fair to him. And his banner was Stockbridge Peasants Revolt, which I thought was really quite a wee bit different. I didn't know there was that many peasants doing that end of Edinburgh. I thought it was actually quite a sort of high standard. But anyway, he was obviously representing his fellow colleagues. The President of Council is legally bound to pursue non-payers, not only for poll tax arrears, but also for council tax and rent arrears. We're going to be having an amnesty for them at some stage. And again, why just the poll tax arrears? And again, I'll come back to the main point of this. It was a referendum bribe not to get non-paying, non-registered debtors to register to vote with the promise it wouldn't be pursued by not paying for the council services that they had received. It's not as if they didn't pay for something they didn't get. They got the council services and didn't pay for it, and that's wrong. And what about the good citizens and the vast majority of our constituents who, while disagreeing with the poll tax, abided by the law and reluctantly paid? The SNP during this period has encouraged people not to pay during the poll tax campaign and give them their due. And that was a disregard there for the consequences, and a lot of people ended up in serious trouble because you ended up not just having the poll tax to pay when you got caught out. There was a surcharge at the end of that as well, and on top of the normal bill, so you had even more to pay. So the motion, as I said earlier, is designed for those not on the register who didn't pay, and it's an insult to the good citizens of Midlothian and Scotland who kept within the law. And the other thing, I mean, if you did pay, is there any chance we could all get a rebate? Because, it seemed a bit fairer to me, because if you've paid for the service that somebody else has used and didn't pay for, I think it'd be only right and proper that you actually got some money back, but I don't think that's going to be happening. But if you look at the sums that are involved, Midlothian 8 million, in Scotland, 500 million, that was the estimates that's been given. I know you could argue idea about the amount shown, but I mean the principle is the same thing. And any coincidence that sums of money were left out of the motion, because if you actually look at it, whatever one it is, 1% of council tax is about £300,000, so you could actually take that forward and work out how much that would be in terms of council tax savings to the good citizens of Midlothian. My reckoning for £8 million about 26%, and okay, there could be variations within that, but I mean there's obviously a substantial difference in what people will be paying the council tax. And I don't think we can justify this, and it penalises the honest endeavours of council taxpayers that have paid tax for the services that they've received. And the money across Scotland could be put to national benefit for everybody as well. I think this motion is duplicitous and it sets a dangerous precedent. I was brought up to respect the law and pay what you were due. And like most working class people, my granny, my parents, everybody, they paid their rent rates in advance because that's what they thought they should do, not pay it at all. And I feel it's wrong that we're actually, giving an amnesty or letting people off with no paying. If you're honest and law-abiding, and it's an insult to everybody past and present who live their lives in a similar way and do not deliberately cheat and steal from friends and neighbours, which is what the deliberate non-payers were and are guilty of. And I've spent most of my time during the poll tax period actually helping pensioners and folk that couldn't afford to pay it, actually helping them with their claims and all the rest of it, and not actually telling them not to pay because that was wrong. It was dishonest and it wasn't the right thing to do. So it wasn't as if we weren't involved in it. Most of my surgeries I was getting bombarded with people who were actually in trouble with the poll tax because they couldn't afford to pay it. And it was wrong. I agree with the sentiments of that. But I'd ask you to support the amendment today because I think it's misleading. I certainly think it's misguiding, and I certainly think it's a very dangerous precedent for the future. Thanks.
Councillor Winnie to second.
Yeah, thanks very much, Provost. Happy to second Councillor Montgomery. And as Councillor Montgomery alluded to, I was a district councillor in Edinburgh Council at the time of the introduction of the poll tax. And the problems we had was actually helping those people that genuinely couldn't afford to pay. Because as Councillor Montgomery said, if you're a single person in the house, then you paid a single community charge. If there's a family of 4 that were over 18 and were entitled to, each and every one of them was entitled to pay an amount. So that was 4 times coming out one of these households. And a lot of people couldn't afford it, and measures had to be put in place, certainly by the council, keeping within the law, may I hasten to add, to ensure that these people were helped out the way that we're helping people today because of the bedroom tax. So there's no dispute about helping people. The difficulty for me is that when you get the First Minister of your country standing up there as the spokesperson for Scotland and making this announcement off the hoof, which he's good at doing because he does that all the time, to my mind that is foolish at best and inappropriate at worst. And the reason I say it's inappropriate is it sends out totally the wrong message. Millions of people in this country had to pay that community charge, whether they liked it or not, whether they thought the system was right, wrong or indifferent or not. Now, if you take the same view for the council tax that we pay just now, which everybody turns around and says isn't an appropriate way of raising money for council services, then to my mind, other people will just turn off and not bother paying the council tax. Now, I think that's wrong. I was never certainly brought up in my family. I was brought in my family to keep within the law, and I was told by my parents that you had to pay your way in society. And it wasn't about that you could just make up your mind whether you wanted to or didn't want to. You had to make sure that your debt was paid. Now, these people bought a service, bought a council service. Whether we like it or not, whether they agreed that they used all the services or not, the collective bought the service, and they have an entitlement to pay for that service. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I'm surprised that the motion's on the order paper today. And I say so, Provost, because when Councillor Thompson was first elected to the council, he never at any time brought up a motion saying that we should be abolishing the poll tax, or community charge as it was called. When there was another group of elected members from the Scottish Nationalist Party elected in 2007, right through to 2012, I don't remember a motion coming up saying that we had had enough, we should abolish it, it should be put to rest, etc., etc. And in fact, in the 2.5 years since the administration, the coalition administration has come to being, I can't remember a motion coming up on the order paper that felt that this was such an important item to be discussed by this council. So, surprised in that sense. But even more surprised that the author of the seconding is Councillor Peter de Vink, a well-known Thatcherite who lived in the Thatcherite Britain, the very Britain that we faced the community charge on. And I thought to myself, what's going on here with Councillor de Vink? Councillor de Vink, you can't put all the wrongs of your years under the table and look for divine intervention. I don't think necessarily there's a seat up there for you when you depart this earth. And I don't think all the wrongs that have gone on before, which we all hated, can just be put under the table in the way that you say it. Now, it's like going to a bank and asking for some money and then deciding that you shouldn't actually bother paying it back. Same thing, and if you get off the register, you can't be found for 6 years. As you rightly said, Councillor de Vink, you just write it off. Well, I'm sorry, I don't believe in that. I never have believed in that. I believe you have to pay your way in society, and you have to try your very best to pay your way in society. And for those that can't pay their way, we have to have a hand out there to help them in that. But I really do think that for you now to be in a position, Councillor de Vink, to actually share the same thoughts and beliefs as Tommy Sheridan, who was a can pay, don't pay campaigner. And let's not forget that. That was the motto that he put out. Can pay, but won't pay. And I think that people should pay. Now, I'm not going to bother going on about those that ended up on a register for various reasons. But we have always, as a council, and not one of us, in fact, in some of the MSPs within the chamber down in Holyrood, one of them, by the way, the local government minister at this moment in time, was leader of Renfrew Council. They went after the non-payers, but hey-ho, he sat there because his great leader stood up there and says, we're just now going to abolish it. Now, abolish it by all means. I think it's terribly wrong. I think it's ill-conceived. However, if the money is outstanding, then that money belongs to the councils because they have provided the service in the first place. Please support the amendment.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. That rather reminds me of the saying that the law is applied equally to rich and poor, that neither are allowed to sleep roughly in the streets. It's a very complex business as to whether we write off debt which has perhaps immorally been built up. Third world debt is a prime example of that, where according to the laws, according to things that have been signed up to by people, then we shouldn't write them off, but people like me think perhaps you should. Rather than going into the whys and wherefores of what's behind these motions, what's been said by various politicians, the motives, if you like, behind them, I prefer to look at the actual wording. And I support both the motion and the amendment. I find myself often in this kind of situation. I have no issue at all. In fact, I agree very much with the second paragraph of the amendment. There's no harm in asking. I think there are two chances of this actually coming to pass, as they say, fat and slim, but there's no harm in asking. Where I do have issue with the amendment, though, and again, as I say, I always look very closely at the words rather than the motives, is why on earth was the word welcomes removed and the word notes put in? If it were not for that single word, then I would find myself, I think, very much supporting the amendment. Can I ask the proposers of the amendment why they removed welcomes and replaced with notes?
Councillor Gallantry.
Let's just cut to the chase here. This isn't about collecting ancient poll tax debts. This is all about punishing people who registered to vote during the referendum campaign. This is what the Labour Party can't stomach. I mean, I'm lost for words here, honestly. What has happened to the Labour Party? Do you think that the ordinary working person, the ordinary man and the ordinary woman would have the vote if we'd stuck by the rules at that time? The people who didn't pay the council tax, the poll tax at that time, they were going outside the law at that point, but they were doing it for a just and proper reason. And now, after a generation, we have a Labour Party who are arguing that these people should be punished. And why? Because they registered to vote in a democratic referendum. It's a scandal, you know. The referendum campaign energised and politicised the people of Scotland, and we as a council have a duty to encourage as many individuals as possible to participate in the political process of our country. I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Montgomery, would you care to sum up?
I'll be brief, Provost, because I can see I've actually nearly convinced Councillor Baxter, so I might actually win the vote here. I don't know how it's going to go. But again, I'd urge you again to support the amendment. If all the councils in Scotland took a similar position to this, I think that's something we might want to put forward and ask if we could get some funding for what's being lost. I think that would actually help the good citizens in Scotland. As far as the points based, I don't welcome the First Minister's intervention in this, Councillor Baxter, because I think it's wrong and I think it's playing politics. We're getting accused of playing politics here. We're not. We didn't put the motion in. We're debating the motion. It wasn't our motion that was put up. I think it would have been easier to see once it had maybe gone through the Scottish process, then have a debate on it, whether we argued with it or not. But anyway, we are where we are on it. And I think the motives are clear. So we're keeping the notes part of it in. In terms of non-payment and those who register, Councillor Coventry, both of these were deliberate. They deliberately didn't register so they didn't have to pay. They deliberately registered so they could vote in the referendum, and that was to vote yes. So that's quite clear, and they're now being rewarded for that by writing off this debt. But, you know, I'll leave you with this. Right? I could go on for a lot longer, but back in the day, information arrived at my desk in Midlothian Regional Council about the 15 SNP candidates that had stood in the Midlothian Council elections at the height of the poll tax. And I eventually got interviewed by the data protection officers. I think it was Reading they came up from, and the SNP reported me to them. And out of the 15, and you got to bear in mind the SNP's big policy at the time was not to pay the poll tax. Out of the 15, every one of them in Midlothian that was a candidate that was paying it, and 2 of them were actually paying it a year in advance. So you can actually check back in that if you want. So to say it was duplicitous would be actually putting it mildly. They were telling folk not to pay it. They were paying it themselves, and 2 of them paid a year in advance. So we don't need to go any further in Midlothian for it. So I would ask you to support the motion. We've been quite clear in this. It was wrong not to register. It was wrong not to pay. And they're entitled to register for the referendum vote, but you shouldn't be actually getting off with not paying a debt that you actually cheated and robbed off your neighbours because they had to pay more because you weren't paying anything.
Right, Councillor Baxter.
Yes, sorry, can I come back on this? Because I don't welcome the First Minister's intervention in this, or for that matter in just about anything else, but I do welcome the Scottish Government's plans to legislate against the collection of the historic poll tax. Are we saying that the proposers of the amendment do not welcome that?
No.
If I can just say a few words here. I was heavily involved in the poll tax campaign at the time, and let me say a few historic facts to Councillor Montgomery. Tommy Sheridan...
I've summed up.
I'm giving information to a councillor. I'm giving information to a councillor who asked for information, and that's what I will continue to do. Let me get you the historical facts. Tommy Sheridan was in the Labour Party at the time, not the Scottish Socialist Party. He formed that much later. And his campaign was, don't pay. The Scottish National Party's campaign was, can pay, won't pay, until the hated poll tax was abolished, and then we paid up. We didn't encourage poor people not to pay. They encouraged the poor people to continue paying if they could. And as for Alex Salmon intervening in this to encourage a yes vote, to my recollection, it was the 19th of September when he said it, not on the 18th of September or the 17th of September, so it was after the vote. And I think it's appalling that people who had registered to vote for the first time for many, many, many years were then pursued by people who had been chapping the doors on the 17th and the night of the 17th, telling the poll tax bogeyman he's coming to get you. And I think you should be ashamed in the no side for doing that. Can I ask you to sum up, Councillor Thompson?
I'll try to be brief, Provost. I think, yeah, there's... I did personally think it's slightly strange to describe it as a bribe, given that the announcement was made on the 2nd of October and the referendum was on the 18th of September. And how you actually make somebody a bribe after the event of a vote, I really can't get my head around that one. Absolutely, there's a big debate to be had about how we pay for council services, and COSLA's now taking a position supporting the Commission and strengthening local democracy. There's a need to look at the whole system of local taxation, and that's going to be working its way through. That's a debate that we've still to have, but that's further down the line. But I do find myself sitting here slightly disbelieving of some of the comments I'm hearing. I suppose it's changed days indeed. I very warmly welcomed Peter's support for this resolution, because recognising the flaws and the immoral nature of the poll tax, I had assumed, perhaps wrongly, that that position would also be shared by my colleagues from the Labour Party. Perhaps it's red Tories indeed, Provost. It's a bizarre situation we seem to find ourselves in. Councillor Emery asks why I've never moved a motion to abolish the poll tax. Well, to my knowledge, the poll tax was long gone before I was ever elected, so why would I be putting forward a motion to abolish it? What this motion is doing is welcoming the Scottish Government's plans to legislate against collection. It's not a motion about abolishing the poll tax, that's long gone. And the reason that the poll tax is different from other... The reason the poll tax is different from the other outstanding debts that are built up by the council, it is a very, very clear difference. The poll tax was discredited and scrapped years and years ago. You're talking 25 years ago. The council tax is an ongoing and current. It's maybe not perfect, but it's the system we've got. Nobody has put forward proposals. There have been no campaigns to say that the council tax is immoral. Nothing like we had with the poll tax. And it was recognised at the time that that was the situation with the poll tax. And I'm sure there were members, colleagues in the Labour Party, who at that time would have been strongly campaigning against the poll tax. And I wonder how comfortable they feel today with some of the comments that have been made. It's a bizarre situation we do find ourselves in today, Provost. As I'd said in moving the motion, the government proposal includes an indication of reimbursement to councils on the basis of those funds that are currently being collected. So I think the fact is we should see some, albeit a small amount, some funding coming back. So yeah, it's with some puzzlement and confusion that I sit here. I'm not suggesting that we accept the amendment, and really very, very confused at the fact that, I'd heard some of the talk about the red Tories and the fact that the Labour had changed so much, but I didn't expect to see a Labour group in Midlothian become Thatcher apologists.
Now move to the vote. Those in favour of the amendment, please show. Those in favour of the motion, please show. 8. The motion is carried. Item number 7, a report by Mr Blair on the COSLA Community Justice Subgroup.
Thanks, Provost. This report invites Council to consider representation on the COSLA Community Justice Subgroup. The detail regarding the group is set out in Section 2 of the report, and today Council is asked to do two things. Firstly, endorse the action of the Chief Exec in consultation with the leader to put forward Councillor Kath Johnston as a nominee, and secondly, consider the position regarding appointing a second nominee as set out in Section 2.2 of the report. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
A very brief, Provost. I think, yeah, it's obviously going to be a very important role to be undertaken. Councillor Johnson is the regional chair of the Community Justice Authority, so that was the role that she was nominated in. I would further propose as the second nominee, Councillor Provost Joe Wallace, to be the second nominee for Midlothian. Obviously, there's going to be a significant amount of work done here, and we want to make sure that Midlothian's voice is strongly represented in developing these proposals.
Councillor Coventry.
Yeah, I'll second those proposals.
Is there any other nominations? Okay, carried. Thank you. Item 8, report by Evelyn McHugh on Chief Social Work Officer Report 2013-14.
Thank you, Provost. This is the report that is submitted to Scottish Government by the Chief Social Work Officer on social work activities across the Council for the year ending in the 31st of March. Members will note that this is a very significant time of change for social work. The context in which we're working on is changing very dramatically. And I guess the year that the report reports on has been one where we've been preparing for major legislative changes, in particular the introduction of the integration of health and social care, the introduction of self-directed support, the new Children's Act and the criminal justice reforms. Locally, I think what's been most significant is the service developments that are highlighted in the report. We've seen changes that aren't just about the structure of how we deliver services, but that are also about social work practice. And that is nowhere more evident than in the shift from delivering services in a care home context to the new service in Cowan Court, in the shift from the children's centres in Midfield to the practice currently in the Dalkeith Children's Centre, the move from traditional casework to the more innovative practice that we're seeing in the family resilience team, the visibility of the work we're doing in Marac around ensuring that we're protecting and supporting women who are vulnerable to domestic violence, and the coming together of all of our protection services in relation to public protection. Key themes that for services is, as evidenced again in the report, is the importance of upskilling and supporting our workforce. These changes bring very significant challenges, both in the skills required and the roles that they must fulfil, and that's outlined in the report. But the other big shift is a move towards more preventative services, of working in a much more co-productive way and ensuring that we're working much more collaboratively with communities and with the voluntary sector within communities. And again, the report also notes the very significant financial challenges within which services are being delivered, and how a service redesign is being used to reshape how we do things so that we can protect frontline services, and that nowhere has that been more evident than the very significant savings that have been achieved in children's services during the year that's been referred to. And finally, I would want to acknowledge the contribution that the delivery of social work and social care services does not sit in isolation within the Council. And while there's a lot of focus on partnership with our external partners, I think we should also emphasise the significance of the work right across the Council and supporting the work that we do. And in particular, thinking about the work that's been done in libraries, about providing support to some of our more vulnerable people in our communities, making sure people are well connected, using libraries as basis where people can get, like in mental health, good information on their health needs. The work of leisure centres in terms of supporting people's well-being through physical activity, and also the work throughout the Council in providing work placements for young care leavers. I think they provide a few of the many examples there is of how the whole Council working together to support the delivery of social work services and outcomes for people who receive them. I would ask members to consider the recommendations in section 5.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Provost. Obviously, it would normally be Councillor Johnson who would comment on this report, but as she's representing Council with Councillor Russell at SCC, I'll do my very best. Obviously, it's clearly been a very busy year for social work services in Midlothian, in a year with a significantly changing landscape and a lot of new legislation and innovation coming forward. We're already seeing the benefits in Midlothian of the integrated in health and social care agenda. That's already starting to work its way through, and the benefits of the Change Fund when communities coming together and professionals and volunteer organisations in the spirit of partnership, so that those who are alone in our communities will give the support there to ensure that they're not isolated as they may otherwise have been. And absolutely recognising the work of volunteer organisations and working alongside the professionals that we have. Across the services, we're seeing new ways of doing things, and in children's services, we're using the Dalkeith House in a new way to support families, and the family resilience team working in some of our most troubled families in a much more joined up way to get far better outcomes for the individuals involved. Obviously, as we look at shrinking budgets, we do need to look at how we work in a different way, and redesigning services and working with those who receive them is central to ensuring that the delivery continues to be successful. But through that, it does create the training and development opportunities that are available to staff to ensure that at all times that they're adapting to the changes that are taking place. I think on that, Provost, I'd certainly want to acknowledge and commend the commitment and dedication of all those working in this area. We know it can be a very, very challenging and difficult area of work, but would certainly like that acknowledged and passed on to those staff working in these areas. Thanks.
This report is only for noting. Is there any other comments? No? Okay. Thank you. Item 9, Financial Strategy 2015-16 to 2017-18, report by Gary Fairley. Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, this report provides Council with an update on the delivery of the financial strategy with its focus on the Scottish Government spending plans for 2015-16 and how they may impact on Midlothian. Government plans have been set against the profile of austerity that the UK Government has embarked on. And as you can see from the report, commentators indicating that the 2015-16 may be described as a milder year in terms of the reductions that the public sector face. The Government's plans, as published on the 9th of October, indicate that Scottish local government will receive nearly 9.985 just under 10 million. I've got my decimal points in the wrong place, sorry. 9,895 million pounds, sorry. And that represents a broadly cash flat settlement compared with on a like-for-like basis with the current financial year. The conditions attached to the settlement are set out in section 3 of the report and in the letter that's subsequently been circulated yesterday. In terms of the impact on Midlothian, the settlement, the actual individual council settlements will be published early next month, although at this point we expect the published spending plans to be broadly in line with the indicative allocations that were already set out in the financial strategy. Turning to the rest of the financial strategy, sections 4 to 6 set out the latest position with the various work strands, and they broadly remain as they were reported back in September. And that follows the timetable set out in section 7, which is to allow decisions on the 2015-16 budget and more generally on the wider financial strategy to be taken at Council in December. The reserves position, which is set out in section 9, reflects the latest information available as set out in the report on item 10, And today, Provost, Councillor asked that I agree that the recommendations set out in the report. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Provost. Yes, obviously it still continues to be a challenge as we look to address the budget we face. It has to be welcomed that the Scottish Government have done all possible to protect local government's share of the national budget, and that in tough times with the cuts coming from the Westminster Government, these efforts are being made. Obviously, the letter that's come to Council Leaders outlines a number of the funding streams and support and issues around that, which is helpful. Turning to the very specific budget gaps, if you like, for each of the years coming, obviously starting from a position of just over £2.5 million gap for this coming year rising to the 17 almost million in 2017-18, we have made significant progress towards this with a projected surplus for this year of just over £1 million, and the gap of what was almost 17 million by 17-18 coming down to 7.5. That's very much on the basis of delivery of actions that we've agreed, and we can't underestimate the task that's at hand to ensure that these targets are met. At the last council meeting, I asked officers to bring forward further additional proposals, and I'm well aware that these are being worked through, and that further detail will be presented to the Business Transformation Steering Group and then on to the Council in December, which should look to go a bit further yet again in addressing the outstanding gap that we still face. Because we've got this the situation of the surplus this year, it does make available to us an opportunity to have a sort of fairly wide consultation on the budget after we've agreed the principles of it in December, so into the early next year to sort of have that consultation in the following 2 years, I think will be very useful. As part of that, Provost, I'm very keen to see and would ask officers to bring forward at earliest opportunity a report that looks to us to see what more we can do to let communities make more decisions for themselves. I'm sure all of us in this chamber I would hope would agree with the principle that the decisions made about a community are made best by those who are most local to it, and that's why we have local government, and we as local government councillors are play an important role in ensuring that our community's views are represented. That's not to say that even more locally than us decisions couldn't be made, and I'd like to see a report coming forward which outlines an option to genuinely devolve further budget directly to our communities. I think when we look at some of the things that are regularly brought up with us at our surgeries at community councils, it's things about the maintenance of flower beds and hanging baskets and support for galleries. I'd like to see an option coming forward where the communities could have a direct say over the use of this. And I'm going to be very open here and say that I think that our council environmental funds should form part of that, and that the communities should have direct control over these, as opposed to us as elected members. We have an opportunity to make many decisions, but I think it's important that we respect the communities we represent and we empower them to make a number of decisions on their own behalf. Again, obviously, the detail of that I would hope we can see coming forward in early course, but I would like to see consulted upon to ensure that we have it in a format that works, because as we move forward in the spirit of the Community Empowerment Bill, it's only by engaging our communities and giving more decision making directly to communities will we genuinely see the continued participation and enthusiasm continuing through as we go. So, Provost, the recommendations in the report are to note the publication of the draft budget and to note the update strategy. Obviously, we will have detailed proposals coming forward in December, but in the meantime, we'd request that further piece of work to be carried out.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. I'm quite pleased at the concepts that Councillor Thompson has brought forward with a view to more democratising and opening up budget decision-making, even albeit perhaps on a local and a small level, to more community involvement. Both Councillor Thompson and myself attended recently a community planning seminar at which participatory budgeting was very much the theme, and it's something which I think both of us warm to, and we'd like to see encouraged a bit more. There are precedents. Leith decides, for example, in Edinburgh, and I think we should be going down that path. And I'm also pleased to hear that my proposals a couple of years ago to democratise the use of councillors' environmental funding, which were very strongly criticised at the time, will hopefully be taken on board, and we may move in that direction of more participatory budgeting right down at ward level.
Thank you. Council happy to not report. Thank you. Item number 10, Financial Monitoring 2014-15, General Fund Revenue, report by Gary Fairley, Head of Finance and Integrated Services Support.
Thanks, Provost. The second financial report appraises Council of the performance with the revenue budget and sets out details of the material variances. The projections contained in the report indicate a small net overspend of £266,000, and that's set out in the detail in Appendix 2 on pages 55 to 61 of the agenda. And that sets out the factors which give rise to that net overspend and the actions that are being taken to control expenditure. The variance arises after reflecting a financial discipline savings against the budget of some £571,000. Those are detailed in Appendix 3. Section 2.5 on page 50 provides an update on the movement in the General Fund reserves, and it indicates at the year end a general reserve in the region of £7 million. I suppose I would remind members that the figures set out in the report at this point are early projections in the financial year, and we'll bring a further Q2 report to Council in December. Provost, today Council has recommended to approve the financial discipline savings and otherwise note the contents of the report.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, obviously there's clearly some movement in overspends and underspends. I think the explanations and actions being taken to address these are there. Recommendations are laid out in section 4, and I'm simply happy to move the report at this stage.
Councillor Muirhead.
Yes, a question I've got on page 62 in the financial discipline review that Gary just referred to. Of the £571,000 possible savings there's about a sixth of it is attributed to one item. The third item in children and families, further impact to children's services transformation strand, mainly decommissioned contracts. I had some difficulty understanding what that was, and maybe I could get an explanation of what that is, and also an assurance that whatever it is, it's not going to have a direct impact on frontline services. So if Mary could maybe provide that explanation. Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Muirhead. Some time ago we put a report up to Council about reducing budgets within children's services, and part of it was decommissioning services from Children's First, where we had family support at Cucan and Hawthorne Den, and we also had family group conferencing, and this is the upshot of that report. We have family support workers in Pennycook that are dealing with issues that arise. We're working very closely with our schools, so that was about decommissioning services. Now, we had also discussed it with Children's First for 2 years about improving the service, and what we were saying is what we were looking for from the service. So we decommissioned it in conjunction with them. So there's some parts of the contract we still fund Children's First for, and other parts that we don't, because we do it in-house.
The main thing is we're confident that you may refer to the schools taking on certain roles there, that they are able to take that on without any impact or knock-on impact to other work that they would have been doing when they're now going to be doing this. Is that, can we get that kind of assurance?
I can give you reassurance that the schools are still supported from the in-house family support work that goes on within Midlothian Council. So the impact has been negligible.
Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, I would just maybe like the officers to give us some assurances here, because I see through the one-off costs for the voluntary service and early retirement that we've spent nearly £4.8 million in huge big payoffs to clear staff shoes, I think you put it. And we had some serious concerns at the time that it just seemed to be when the management review came out. It didn't come out when the cleaning review was on, the janitorial review or any of the sort of lower paid. It was only when the management review started to take place that we needed this enhanced scheme that we've got. And we now see that we've spent £4.8 million on that. And then when you actually go to My Future, we still see that the cost in Q1, and this is an additional cost, an unplanned for cost, £205,000 for people who've been displaced. So not only have we spent nearly £5 million on massive big payoffs, bankers' bonuses I think we aimed them at, we're still actually overspending with £205,000 at Q1 on people that have effectively been displaced. Can we get some assurances that these figures will start to drop a bit now that we've spent the bankers' bonus money?
Provost, there was a full report to Council in September on the progress with the voluntary severance scheme, and that did highlight the one-off costs associated with severance in accordance with the policy that had been agreed by Council. As members will be aware, the switch programme allows for staff who are displaced to work in transition for a period until we find them alternative roles within the Council. At Q1 we estimated that the unfunded cost of that would be £205,000. I can advise Council that the Q2 report, which will come forward in December, we will see that figure drop significantly to £127,000. And again, that unfunded cost would have to be compared against the cost of statutory termination payments, whether redundancy or, in certain cases, people's access to pension. So you will see the My Future, the unfunded cost, fall within the second quarter. The projection, clearly the payments that have been made for severance won't change. Those costs have already been fully committed.
Councillor Milligan. Yeah,
it's maybe just reiterating this. This isn't the cost of My Future for folks sitting in there. This is up and above a 6 months salary that goes in with everybody. Now, I would have thought, with having paid out just under £5 million in huge payouts to move folk on, that if My Future could ever work, it would work at this moment in time, and we wouldn't have anybody sitting in transformation or transition.
Yeah, there are a significant number of staff who have gone through the My Future programme, and that's the net impact. I'm happy to provide Councillor Milligan with further details in terms of the statistics around the My Future programme.
Councillor Pottinger.
Yeah, just on the same point. I mean, there's hundreds of folk left the council this year. You know, hundreds of families are affected by redundancy and facing unemployment. And there's very few sitting in switch, I believe, just now. So there's very few displaced people. I'd like more information on how many were displaced and found other jobs and how many have actually been made redundant.
I don't have that information to hand, but I can certainly provide it to Councillor Milligan and Councillor Pottinger in due course.
Councillor Thompson.
Although I'm sure the one thing that Mr Fairley could say is that nobody is made redundant because we've got a no compulsory redundancy policy. So from that point of view, that number is 0. I think, I know what Councillor Milligan's trying to do, talking about it as big payoffs to folk, but I think you need to be very clear that it's service reviews that actually are generating the majority of the movements through voluntary severance. So that's all different grades throughout the council. It's not simply management posts. I think we have a very clear policy on the terms for voluntary release. I think it's not always been the case, and some individuals have perhaps been made offers in the past that were not necessarily as transparent as certainly the policy we have now. But the 4.7 million that's been paid out there I think the projection and the saving, the annual saving on the pay bill is about £2 million a year as of next year. So we cover that off within 3 years at that rate. So yes, there's a one-off cost immediately, but there's an ongoing saving that will work into many multiples of that as we proceed.
Councillor Pottinger.
Yeah, just to refine my words, you know, how many people have accepted redundancy as their only option, as opposed to how many people are sitting in transition and switch?
The numbers of people that were accepted voluntary severance were reported in full to Council in September, so I would refer Councillor Pottinger back to that report. Certainly I can come back to you with the numbers that are in switch. It changes day by day, so I'm happy to give you an update once I have the up-to-date figures.
Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, Councillor Thompson tells everybody he thinks he knows what I'm doing. All I'm trying to do here is to get to the bottom. We've spent nearly £5 million, but we've still got a massive overpayment and switch. The idea of that money is that this would create a through flow people there. And yes, I understand that there's quite a few in here, but there are also quite a few that have went out here with massive big payments here. Let's no kid on that there's no massive big payments being made, because there have been. But the fact of the matter is, the point I'm getting to is the through flow that was supposed to be having created from this doesn't seem to be working when we've still got a £250,000 cost in here on Q1, and even going down to £127,000, it is still in £127,000 above what's been budgeted for. And keep in mind, everybody who moves into switch moves in with 6 months of their annual salary. That's taken in with them, so they have to have been there 6 months prior to there being any overspend, and that's the part I find surprising.
Okay, finish that report. Thank you very much. Item number 11, report by the Director, Resources, John Blair.
Thanks, Provost. This report seeks Council direction on the level of support associated with the 2015 Festival of Friendship. In my report in section 2, I've provided commentary on the previous Council deliberations and the existing policy relating to civic twinning functions. I've also provided details on the Festival of Friendship programme as set out on page 64. The next festival is scheduled to take place in 2015, and to allow the necessary planning to take place, Council is invited to consider the recommendation detailed on page 66 of today's papers. Thanks, Provost.
Okay. Midlothian's partnerships with Heinsberg and Carmarthen Estergom were formed in 1973 by Midlothian County Council. The Festival of Friendship was devised by the then Midlothian District Council in 1978 as a means of encouraging bands, choirs, dance groups and sports people to become involved in the partnership activity. It has alternated between 3 ex-mining areas for many years, and a lot of goodwill has been generated. I attended the festival in Hungary last year, where we discussed future activity, and it was generally accepted that financial restraints would play a big part in future events. It's Midlothian's turn to host the festival in 2015, and as you can see from the report, it is quite a sum of money that is required to do this in any meaningful way. This may very well be the last one, so I ask the Council to underwrite this to ensure that the event can take place in 2015. Thank you. The Council happy to underwrite? Councillor Milligan.
Provost, no, sorry, we're not happy at all to underwrite this. And indeed, having some thought about it and some debate about it, the fact you make the point that this could be the last one Well, let's make the last one then. That's as simple as this. If it's going to come to an end, let it come to an end, let it die out now. What we're talking about here is taking £25,000 worth of the taxpayers' money and going to Cayley's, going for dances, going for dinners, going for sightseeing and paying for hotels, etc. I understand that there are a lot of supporters of twinning. I'm not one of them, never have been. And indeed, you'll actually see in the background of the paper, I made a statement way back in 2011, quite clearly setting out that at a time where we're cutting essential services to the public and having to trim back your services to spend money on twinning and stuff like that was a thing in the past, that we needed to concentrate on our core services, and I'm certainly not going to be voting to spend £25,000 on somebody going for a ceilidh, a drink, a dance, or going to visit Edinburgh or staying in a nice hotel. So I'm going to move that we do not agree any further funding for this, and the Provost himself says this is likely to be the last one. Let's make the last one the last one.
Yep. Thanks, Provost. I mean, I think the fact that there is discussion, and this is the last one, would suggest that the other two twinning partners are not keen to host it themselves in the future. I mean, there were discussions, and I'm not going against anything that's happened since, Provost. I mean, you're entitled to do what the discussions that you've had. But there was discussions before about winding this one up, because certainly my own feeling at the time was that the Midlothian one was more or less the same people that went all the time, both ways. And I don't think it really was what the spirit of twinning was. The ones that work in individual towns in Midlothian, I think they're a different argument there, because it is more school groups. Certainly the times I've been involved in, you'll have seen it yourself, there's actually more community involvement, whereas I really feel that it's almost, self-interest wouldn't be the right word to use, but it's the same folk that go back and forward all the time. It's almost like a self-enclosed holiday, and I'd be very reluctant to actually agree £25,000 for next year as well, because I think by the very fact that it's likely to be the last one, we tend to suggest that other groups are not prepared to really continue with it after that. And I think if there's any support at all that we should be putting into it, should be into individual twinning groups for the likes of Loanhead, Bonnyrigg, Dalkeith, Anderhall and Pennycook, which all work at different levels and actually fairly successfully, and have been going for a long period of time. I get all the stuff about why this was set up originally, but I really genuinely don't think it actually works now, and I'd be the same as Derek. I'm reluctant to spend £25,000 on something I don't think would be any great value for us, and certainly in terms of any support that we should be given, I'd prefer to go for the individual town twinnings that we've got in Midlothian.
Mr Byrne.
Thank you, Provost. I've always seen local councils, Midlothian in particular, as having a key role to play in cultural events. And recently we've had very positive discussions on things like Midfest and support for the Mining Museum, which I was delighted at the outcomes of these. I think this report does summarise well the issues, and I think Adam in particular has highlighted one or two, the really active nature of twinning in the towns in Midlothian. Young people have benefited tremendously from these town events, and they are part of this overall twinning effort, as you might say, in Midlothian. And it's young people that I would wish to focus on. The Festival of Friendship comes around every 2 years, but it only comes around every 6 years for Midlothian to finance. But it's not just this connection with Hungary and Germany. It's not just about the Festival of Friendship. That brings us all together, allows us to have discussions, formal discussions about the future. There's a lot more to this tremendously successful Midlothian twinning, which has lasted, as the paper says, since I believe 1973, so it's many decades. I've recently personally experienced swimming groups coming over. I remember going to an event in Pennycook. We had some of our younger people going over to a youth forum about 3 years ago. We had a wonderful sports festival, which many of us, I remember went up to the campus to attend, where the three countries came together here in Midlothian. And really exciting is the most recent FE link with Edinburgh College that some of us attended a social evening. And this is a really exciting project for the future, where our young people and the German young people have the opportunity to experience each other's working cultures and each other's education systems. The focus of the Festival of Friendship is largely on, to some extent, sport, but the major focus is on music. And I know many of us in this chamber have attended events at Newbattle High School in the past, at Lasweed High School and at Pennycook High School, where we've heard the most outstanding performances, whether it be the fabulous brass bands from Scotland and Germany in particular, or the dancers from Hungary. It is a magnificent event, and I do believe the young people get a tremendous amount out of it. I do sincerely hope that this event goes ahead, but as the paper highlights, I think we have to look very seriously at how much can be done in-house. It's still a cost, don't get me wrong, it's still a cost, but it's not money that actually goes out of the council. How much we can do in-house, and also whether we could really try and get some external funding so that this figure quoted in the paper could come out less. And in doing this, that we have a programme that is realistic and doesn't spend money unnecessarily. So I'm sorry to convey strong enthusiasm for this. I'm not being political in any way, but I have been around twinning for quite a long time. I think it's a wonderful cultural thing, but I think if we make every effort to reduce the cost of this event, I really do sincerely hope, for the sake of our young people and the sake of the young people in Germany and Hungary in particular, that this can go ahead. Thank you, Provost.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I've been involved in twinning, town twinning principally with St Bonnyrigg, St Cecilia Call for many, many years, and I've seen it change. I've seen how enthusiasm many, many years ago has dwindled, and I think that's not because people are less interested in forming relationships with other cultures, with other communities, but I think it's just the way the world has effectively got smaller. People go to Paris for a weekend now, whereas then the only opportunity perhaps anyone in the family had was to go to San Cyr or the Sog or whatever with a school trip. And I think it's the same at a county level. Kreis-Heinsberg is not that far away. Even Comram-Estragon isn't really that far away. And I think we have to recognise that. I think we really have to have a radical rethink of any twinning relationships that we have at both Midlothian level and within the towns. And I think we've got to take into consideration as well the budgetary constraints we have. We cannot afford to, these things cost a lot of money, as we see. As part of that as well, I would like to see us continue with twinning, but not in the way it has been in the past. Somebody approached me with a view to having a town twinning relationship between Bonnyrigg and Malawi, for instance. I know that Scotland has very strong links with Malawi, and I'd like to see us have a review to see whether maybe we could progress that in the future. And it wouldn't involve dignitaries going across to Malawi for a long weekend, for instance. It can be done by the internet, it can be done by sending things across. If anyone happens to be going across there as part of the Malawi-Scotland relationship, then we can perhaps ask them to convey messages, etc. So I think that we really have to sit down and have a long look at this. But my own view, I think, is if we hadn't been so far down the road in preparing the Festival of Friendship for next year, I would be inclined to go with my colleagues here and say the last one should be the last one. But given that we are in a position where we've probably given at least verbal commitments to those in the other countries, that I think perhaps we should go with it this time.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I think there's certainly broad agreement for a review of what happens going forward, but actually just picking up the last point Councillor Baxter makes there, I think, yeah, with this one we are quite a distance down the path with it, and it's not simply a case of saying we're not doing it, because we've already told the twinning partners in these other countries that this is happening. In May 2007, 30th of May 2007, I think it would have been the General Purposes Committee agreed the report which would invite similar representation from local authorities at anniversary celebrations here. That's the point that's raised in the second half of the background brief. Now, yes, there was a subsequent change in 2011 to cancel grants. That made no mention of changing anything about invitations or or participation or events that were already in motion. It talks about in future, not those that were already in train at that point. So I think to, at this point, cancel something which is already so far developed, it would reflect very badly on us as a council. So from that point of view, I think we have agreements that were made back in 2007 that we have to make good on. This may well be the last of these festivals, but this council agreed to it. We need to see that through, and we do need to have that perhaps wider look at what we do with twinning, what shape twinning takes as we go forward, because it is going to become something different. I think that seems to be clear, but we can't simply overnight suddenly say, no, this isn't happening.
Thank you. Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, Provost. I didn't know how far down the road we are, but it's not until next year. And I would have imagined it would be over the summer holidays next year, so you're 9, 10 months away. October the 14th, so we're a year away. If you look at the background of this, we were quite clear in May 2011 that we needed to rein this in. This kind of expenditure was to be reined in completely. If officers for the council just yet again decided to ignore what the council had to say, when we cancelled the grant for the Midlothian Twin Association and made clear, and you can see exactly what I say at the time. We appreciate the historical benefits of twinning links, but we felt at that time that under the current financial climate, when throughout the public sector cuts were being made and were being faced, we needed to rein expenditure in this area as well. And I accept what you're about to say, that we allowed us to be delegated to the Chief Executive with the Provost. We did make very clear that we wanted to stop spending money on these areas, quite frankly. And actually, if I mind the debate on, we talked about trying to get the twinning associations themselves to start raising funds for this instead of actually standing looking for the council to have handouts. I know, for example, Bonnerig Twinning Association, I don't know where the big chunky money they had, I think it got put in a community council budget, and indeed is still lying there. So maybe we want to try and rein some of that money back in, because there's no twinning activity in the areas, and maybe there's the areas out with the council that you think that we can get them. And I genuinely mean this, at a time when we are cutting basic council services and having to rein back basic council services to people and introduce charges to them, we can't be seen to be spending figures of £25,000 on these things.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, sorry, so I just have to pick up a point there, because I've got the report from the May 2011 meeting here, and at the very end of it, it says, in the interim, there are a number of ongoing plans for visits and exchanges in the future, including Festival of Friendship in Heidelberg and a number of incoming exchanges. It is suggested that support for these ought to continue, and pending any review or change in approach. Now, there was a change to the grants to twinning associations, but there's not been that review. I mean, I'm sorry, but the previous administration, if they wanted to carry that through, had 5 years if they wanted to actually stop this, and didn't do it. We're at now a year or a number of months just short of when this is meant to be happening. The report was very clear in talking about these events continuing until a review took place, and I think it's appropriate that we've brought it to the council to decide this today, but I do think we absolutely have to have it happening for next year.
Mr. Muirhead.
Yeah, you say that it's appropriate we bring it to the council today, but you're talking like it's a decision that's already been made. If that had been the case, it would have asked us to note that in here. What it asks us to do is recommend that the council consider the funding request. That's what we're doing, and we're saying no. It's no that it's a foregone conclusion. This is here for debate today, and it's right we're discussing it.
Councillor Pottinger.
Yeah, and you make references to this council's decided this and the council's decided that, but this council was only elected a couple of years ago, and this council hasn't decided anything on these programmes, and obviously I've not been a part of any of that kind of decisions. It's right that the financial decisions should come up to every council, and particularly this issue, which has a lot of overlaps into other twinning initiatives, and yes, the town initiatives is very much a community-based kind of twinning arrangements. But this, to formalise a £25,000 spend, I think is the order to bring it at this time of the major financial difficulties that this council has, and many of the cuts and people were making redundant not making them redundant, allowing them to accept redundancy, you know, and refining my words. But when there's that many people going out the door, and to first to spend £25,000 on basically a nice event, you know, as a Midlothian event, I think it's completely inappropriate spend of public funds. And also bear in mind a lot of overlap activity can take on place. Other things can still go on with the Festival of Friendship, but not financed by Midlothian Council taxpayers. I would obviously support that we do not spend £25,000 or any amount in this bill here.
Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. I'm not aware of the entire history of this, but I know this goes in a 6-year cycle. Commitments have been made in the name of Midlothian, and I would not like to see us reneging on commitments already made.
Okay. Those. Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. Just to pick up on a point Owen made about what the report says, I didn't have the benefit of having the report in front of me. But irrespective of what the report says, it may have says, and I'll accept on your word, that it says that that we had dates planned for this Festival of Friendship. So in 2011, we're now talking about in 2015. I'm certain the 2015 one wouldn't be in there, and if it was, it'll surprise me. But we're talking about 4 or 5 years ago that this report came out. And the fact of the matter is you might have had the next one planned, you might have had the dates in the diary, but I can assure you we didn't have anything planned 4 and 5 years in advance. You might have had dates in diaries, but no plans. And what this seems to me is that officers have just went down the road again, ignoring what we've had to say, and we're here with stuff, and if they've committed this council, let them go and uncommit it.
Okay. Those in favour of Councillor Mulligan's opposition to this, please show.
6.
Those in favour, please show.
8.
Item number 12, Severe Weather 2014-15 Pre-Winter Update, a report by Ricky Buffett, Head of Commercial Operations.
Thanks, Provost. Each year we come forward to members with an outline of preparations for the forthcoming winter. I highlight there 3 specific winters in the kind of recent history, and then I suppose comparing it to last year. As much as anything, just to show how much the weather conditions vary from year to year. And before I actually get asked the question, I can't predict what's going to happen this year. It is very much something that we prepare well for, but as I say, it does vary. In section 2 of the report, we outline the resources and indeed the legal duties that are placed upon us as a council to address the effects of winter, and indeed 2.2 details some of the service levels. I go on further in section 2 just to talk about some of the arrangements that have been in place, and indeed we've built on our experience over the years, and these arrangements have been very effective. To kind of try and put into some context the kind of varying effects of the weather, under the resources section 3.1, you will look at the spend, which in 2010-11 we went up as much as 2.8 million. The following year it dropped back down to 869,000. This year, we talk about within road services a normal winter. And a normal winter for us is about 7 days of snow per year and about 130 occasions of salt treatment. And obviously members will be well aware of the kind of relatively mild winter we had last year, and that's reflected in the next table in terms of the salt usage, where we use just under 3,000 tonnes. In terms of a normal and a winter based on 2012 and a severe winter
under section 3.2, I kind of just outline the typical costs. So coming forward to the recommendations, there's two things. One is obviously to adopt and publish the winter service policy and operational plan for this winter, and that's attached to the report. But the second recommendation, and I suppose it builds on what Gary Fairley's been talking about earlier, and it's just whether members believe that it would be appropriate to seek a detailed report in early 2015 detailing those service areas that perhaps could be considered for a reduction to reduce what we would consider we would normally spend in a normal winter. I'll pause at that point, Provost, and take any questions.
Councillor Rossi.
Thank you, Provost. Thanks, Ricky, for the report. I'm pleased to note that the clearly defined policy that routes to schools and health centres and along the main roads will continue to be priority areas, and ask the Council to accept the first recommendation that we adopt and publish the winter service policy, an operational plan for 2014-15 winter season, and that we reject the second recommendation.
Okay, Council happy to accept. Councillor Baxter.
Sorry, just a question. Just looking at these tables, comparing 2010-11 and 2012-13, they both use roughly the same amount of salt, slightly more in the earlier, but the amount spent in 2010-11 is almost twice as much as 2012-13. I'm just wondering what reason that for that difference.
That would be when we had quite a lot of snow. I mean, we did a lot of activity. For example, we had many areas where we had to remove snow. So it's not involving salt, but it was a number of HGVs that were working late into the night to try and clear a lot of the snow away and putting them into piles. So that was a lot of the expenditure.
Councillor Emery.
Yeah, Provost. The group was actually going to just allow the two recommendations to go through. However, happy to support what Councillor Rossi has moved today. I mean, I happen to think that Midlothian's got itself pretty good now. I mean, we've done a lot of public consultation. We've done a lot of public consultation about the winter maintenance scheme. We had a consultation with the local members. We have spoken to various community councils. There's action groups out there, etc., etc. And there's also like the farming community who come in and support us as well. And I think we've got a pretty robust scheme. And I think the officer's right to come forward and say, well, you know, we're not immune, as the saying goes, to what Mr. Fairley's saying. However, I do think that, you know, before we go to the next stage, we've got to see this winter through as well, because the policy's been there a few years now. We were applauded by the public in general out there for getting our act together and getting it right. Right across the political spectrum, may I hasten to add, there wasn't any division on that. We wanted to get it right for the Midlothian constituents. The officers went away and were tasked with bringing that back. They came back, we amended it, we went back again, etc., etc. We went into consultation, came back again, amended it again. And I think it's a pretty robust document that's in front of us, and I welcome that we are going ahead with it, and it now goes out into public consumption. And I think, unless things have changed, the public will welcome that Midlothian Council is making sure that we can try and keep Midlothian moving during the winter months, and we just have to keep our fingers crossed that what's there is going to be enough. But I mean, I have to say that there was a task group set up within COSLA to look at it, because all councils got cut out that particular year. There wasn't enough salt. We were waiting for the boats to come across from far and wide with salt provision, etc., etc. I think it's really working well now. We work together with other local authorities, and I just think it's a good report, it's a good policy, and we should endorse it.
Councillor Milligan.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I welcome the move. It does seem every time you have a couple of mild winters, the immediate reaction is, oh, let's see if we can cut back that budget, and then you cut it back, and then the next thing you can, you're clamped with snow like we were in 2010-11, and the budget goes through the roof for it. So I think it's right just to sort of leave that line in there. So quite happy to support the fact that any work. However, it should always be ongoing. I just want to make sure that I'm reading this right. There's one omission that I can't find, and probably when you're looking for something, you read the paper 100 times and you can't find it. One of the things we had discussed many years ago, Ricky, was to make sure that the routes to care homes and residential homes be kept clear as part of the priority. I can't see them in there. I'm maybe just missing them. We haven't read it, and I just want to make sure that I'm picking up on the wording here where we talk about all NHS Lothian doctor surgeries and that. I take it, do we also mean, for example, Bonnyrigg Leisure Centre is one of these soft PPP sort of areas, which I don't think it's an NHS property, and I'm just want to make sure that we are talking about all doctors, the health centres and that are operated on, and but we're not suddenly going to find, well, wait a minute, that's a PPP type building or some other type building that we are not going to do it. Can I just get the assurances?
Yeah, just on your first point, Councillor Milligan, in terms of care homes, we've got dedicated resources now to tackle all of these areas, so there is specific resources there, so I can confirm that care homes and the like, we do address that. In terms of the NHS facilities, there are some omissions in terms of the facilities that we have a full service for example, the community hospital, and there are some NHS facilities, i.e. doctor surgeries, that are not included. So what I'll do is I'll provide a full list of those facilities that we do provide a service for.
Councillor Constable.
Thanks, Robert. Yes, just to echo what the others have said, we do have a first-class service in Midlothian. People are proud of it. It's not often the council gets praised, and therefore I think we should keep it on. I would note that when it was in my portfolio, we never had any real trouble at all with the snow.
Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, Provost, sorry, I'm just that wee bit uneasy with Ricky's answer there. I'm no particularly want to list NHS or doctor surgeries that are soft FM or whatever. I'm looking for an assurance that we'll still do them irrespective of that. I know Bonnyrigg Health Centre, for example, I don't think comes under the ownership of NHS. I'm not actually sure how it's that package was put together, and I know at one stage we were saying, well, we're not clearing it, and I think there are several others that come under that same banner. What I'm saying is that I think we should actually be making sure they're on the list for clearing and not just sort of circulating the list, because the public will only understand if you're trying to go to a health centre that there's no be getting cleared. And if there is a contractual problem, we should be going back to NHS, but this was raised 2 or 3 years ago, so I would have thought that we would have already had these discussions with NHS to have this in place, because I do know that we got through it in I think the bad year, which was about 2010-11, we managed to get that agreement through because we did indeed send people into the areas to keep them open. In fact, I can mind a visit in the health centre at Loneheed, Strathesk, and it was snowbound at the time, and we managed to get stuff, and it did that. And when we arrived in at Bonnyrigg, we had, I think, 3 plumbers that were in there that couldn't go about their job, that had made a fantastic job, and it got the council a lot of kudos because a lot of people were welcoming into that.
Okay. Councillor Thompson.
I think the reality is, I mean, you can't predict what's coming with the winter. If it's a bad winter, we'll spend an absolute fortune to try and make sure that we're on top of it. If it's a light winter, then we'll not spend nearly as much. We've got a policy here that gives the outline, but I think it's just an assurance that, I mean, ultimately, where winter's concerned, you spend what it takes to make the policy happen, and that's kind of where we have to be.
Happy to accept the report with recommendation 1. Thank you. Report now by Mr Blair on item number 13 on the Borders Railway, otherwise known as the Waverley Line.
Thanks, Provost. Members are fully aware of the Borders Rail project, which is scheduled to open in exactly 10 months from today. Borders Rail is the longest railway being built in Britain for over a century, and there will be 4 stations in Midlothian as detailed in the report. Detailed of the benefits to Midlothian are also set in section 2.1 of the report, together with the timeline relating to the establishment of a rail link from Edinburgh to Tweedbank. Section 3 outlines the marketing and promotional opportunities available throughout the vicinity of the line. And before moving on to the recommendations, Mr Lawrie, Chief Exec, would also like to address the Council. Thanks.
Thank you, Provost. Just very briefly, in a way to update on the report, I was recently invited to join a group chaired by Scottish Enterprise, involving Enterprise themselves, the Scottish Government, Transport Scotland, Scottish Borders Council and others, to look at maximising the economic benefits of the Borders Railway. I'm aware there's a lot of activity going on in this regard in Scottish Borders, and I think it's important that we ensure we maximise the positive benefits, economic and other, to the communities of Midlothian. And just to say that the proposals in this report are absolutely in line with that developing work.
Thank you. Councillor Rosie.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for the report, John. I'm glad to hear the comments made. One from the Provost referring to it as the Waverley line, and I liked what the Chief Executive was saying. I think we've got to watch here. I just have, and it's been alluded to, that I think, a lot of times it looks like Borders are driving this, and I just get the feeling that Midlothian could be left out. And anyway, I know back in 2008 there were probably good reasons why it was changed from the Waverley Rail Partnership to Borders Rail Project, but I just feel that if we allow it just to keep getting into the psyche, Borders Rail Project, they'll end up the Borders line, and I know in here there's a few wanted to be known as the Knitting line or whatever, but I'm sure that we can come up with something else. But I really think if we've got to look at the tourism benefits of this, and I just feel if we miss out, and allow it to be Midlothian could be left out here, and I think we've really got to pay attention to that. And when we've got to start thinking now, can we start looking at names we can start feeding in that we would like to see? Just a point. But yeah, thanks for the report. Recommend accept.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Chair. It's really a question for John as regarding the papers. I've had quite a number of crazy requests as regarding the station. It's listed as Shaw Fair, but it's just at the back of Newton Village, which hasn't got a shop. And I got asked, will there be a paper shop at the station? I says, I don't know. Will there be a cafe at the station? I don't know. Will there be a bar at the station? I says, look, you'll need to ask the Dutch company that's going to be running the railway. I said, it's not to do with Midlothian Council. But on a mere serious note, John, I noticed for the papers on the infrastructure, when it comes to Shaw Fair, it's got a light here for a bus link to the Royal Infirmary. Now, I know we had the petitions debate this morning about the buses in that area, in Newton Village area, which at the present moment there is none. Has there been a discussion with LRT as regards any putting a bus link when the railway station is open? Because it'd be nuts getting off a train. It'd be like somebody out of Dr. Zhivago, if it's not, that you get off the train and you can't go nowhere. So could you update me if there has been a discussion?
Yep, as referred to at the Petitions Committee this morning, there has been preliminary discussions regarding bus links and associated stations, and that's one of the reasons I'm promoting the group to oversee all the activity, because I think the rail line will be a catalyst throughout Midlothian, and there will be a lot of activity around about stations and the communities, and that's based on the experiences where rail lines have opened elsewhere. So my plan would be to establish the group and come forward with regular updates on issues such as the ones you raised, Councillor Bennett.
Councillor Muirhead.
Provost, I welcome this report that's before us today. It's been a long time in coming, and I see that I always thought that it was about joining communities together, but I see at the top of page 95 and the wee thing there that they're talking about in October 2014, trench laying begins. So that doesn't quite sound like bringing communities together. I presume it should be track. Issue on the infrastructure, Alec just alluded to some of it there. The station naming part of it, in addition to the naming, there are signage options that are being proposed. I think it's unfortunate, and I have taken some ribbon from my colleagues, I've got to say, that 3 of the stations have points of interest being indicated, and there's nothing at Gore Bridge. I would just remind some of them that Bonneright is just as close to the S-Bank station, and there's none pointing there either. But anyway, we have got Vogrie Park, we have got Anderson House in that area that are points of interest that I think people could be pointed to, even though at this time we didn't have transport links direct to them in terms of buses. There are opportunities to take taxis and maybe even go on the Gore Bridge Circular Walk, which again could be highlighted there, and get to some of these attractions. So I would hope that we would be able to do that. As far as the naming thing goes, I don't think that's in the least bit relevant. I'm quite happy that it's called the Borders Line. What will make the difference is what we do as a council, what we do as communities to take advantage of the railway line being there. There are all sorts of businesses that can pop up around supplying the kind of services and plugging the gaps that we've got in some of your transportation, like taking people to some of the attractions that are maybe a wee bit further out, because we are, a lot of your communities are rural or semi-rural. So, it's not just about the name, it's about what we do, and that's what we'll be judged on. So we've got to do as much as we can to take advantage of the Waverley line coming out. The last thing that we want, particularly in areas like Gore Bridge, is for all the people to be jumping on the train going at the tune in the morning, and all the people coming back out at night, and the trains running in the opposite directions empty. People have got to be attracted out to Midlothian, and it's up to us to do something about that. And to be honest, I don't think we should be even raising the issue of name changes at this time.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I'm encouraged by this report as well. However, reading it, we're talking about tourism, we're talking about the environment, but there's no mention about encouraging cyclists into Midlothian using the rail. I have heard a disturbing report that because the carriages are cast-offs, that there's only 2 cycles per train, which is absolutely appalling. Another option for cyclists is to use it as commuters, and I think many people will do that. I've asked in the past that can I get an assurance that we will have lockable, weather-protected cycle racks. You go to the Netherlands and they've got multi-storey cycle racks. That's how many people commute by bicycle. People here will say, I'm not cycling because my bike will go rusty if it's left outside. When I asked about this in the past, I was told that all we might get is something like essentially a bus shelter where the wind and rain can get in and cause untold damage over time to bicycles. I want to see something that's weatherproofed, as you'll see in many stations south of the border, certainly, and also probably throughout Scotland as well. Something that's weatherproof, lockable. People can have confidence they can leave the bike there all day, and when they get back in the evening, it'll be in exactly the same condition, and of course that there's room for them all.
Can't you guarantee they'll still be in the same condition when they come back? We can go for that. Councillor Rosie.
Yeah, just like just addition there to Councillor Muirhead's suggestion. I'm not suggesting we change the name because there's no name for the line yet. It's still known as the Borders Rail Project. But yeah, I think we should keep using that. But it's just that if we've got the chance, I would imagine there's still got to be guaranteed what name, and I think we should just have input in that. That's all.
Councillor Montgomery.
Hi, thanks, Provost. Just an interest to try to be helpful. I mean, I'm actually just trying to collate the dates here, but if the train line opens in September 2015 and the twinning visit for Comerons in 2015 in October, Well, I mean, it's not facetious, but I know we're taking them on the train somewhere in Midlothian, because it's the first rail line we've ever had for donkey's years, and it would actually, I think, it'd be a good way of not christening the rail line, but I think it'd be quite a nice way for a twinning group to actually travel, just for a wee change, instead of going about in buses all day.
Good thinking. Councillor Muirhead.
Sorry, there was an issue that I just wanted a wee bit. I don't know if it's possible to get any further information. It's just something that I've been asked, is about the Saturday, the inaugural journeys. How is all that got to be organised? People have been asking me, how do I get a golden ticket? What is the arrangements for that? And what's meant by an inaugural journey from each of the 9 stations non-stopping?
Does anybody can?
Sorry, Chair, just come in on that.
Okay.
In terms of the event, there is a specific group that's been set up under the chairmanship of Transport Scotland, and all the various organisations are part of that. Transport Scotland very recently appointed a group, Stark as their name, to develop the actual arrangements for the 2 inaugural days, the Friday and the Saturday. What you have before you is the bare bones in terms of what they're proposing. If I can maybe expand on that, for example, the steam train journey on the Friday the 4th, what we're now talking about is a definite stop within Midlothian, and potentially that could be around Newton Grange, and opening some of the links up to the Mining Museum. So that's something that's specifically being developed. What they're really looking for is, I suppose, an agreement that what we're talking about in principle is acceptable, and then we'll develop on that. In terms of the Saturday event, what we're talking about there is to try and open up the experience of the inaugural journeys to more and more people. So what's being talked about is a train, for example, at Shawfair, and it'll go up towards Tweedbank and then back into Edinburgh, and allow people to get off again and back at Shawfair. Similarly for Gorebridge, Newton Grange and S Bank. So it's to allow people to see the work that's been done on the line, and to kind of obviously promote the line on that basis. So that's the purpose of those 9 specific train journeys.
Thank you. Happy then, Councillor Baxter.
Sorry, can I get an answer on cycle storage facilities?
Are there any plans for storage cycle facilities?
There's been 1 or 2 conversations with Network Rail. There's not a definitive answer, because the franchise for provision of trains has recently changed. But I'll take that back and speak with our contacts at Network Rail and Transport Scotland.
Otherwise, happy to accept the report. Thank you. Okay, I now move to item number 14, a note on the seminar Midlothian Council held in Council Chambers. Who's making this report?
Just for members' consideration.
Oh, this is just for consideration. Okay. Thank you. Okay, move to item number 15, New Byers Crescent Gorebridge options to resolve gas migration, a report by Kenneth Lawrie, the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Provost. This report follows on from the seminar on the same subject 2 weeks ago, so the information contained in the report will be pretty familiar to most members. With that in mind, I'll just briefly go over the key elements of the report in front of you today. The starting point for this really is the decision on 17th June to demolish the 64 properties at New Byers Crescent, and at that time you approved 2 options for further consideration. This report seeks to determine which option to pursue. It also provides an update on the legal and insurance positions, the geotechnical report, the role of the incident management team and the criticality of protecting public health, which must remain a paramount consideration for the Council at all times. At 4.2, it is noted that the site does not meet the statutory definition of contaminated land. At sections 4.4 and 4.5, there is an update on the Care for People group and the decanting arrangements which are in process. The options for development are set out at section 6. Option A, to market the site for sale, and option B, for the Council to build on the site itself. The issues, the risks and costs in relation to each of these options, which were discussed at the seminar, are set out at pages 121 to 125 of the agenda. And details of the potential of the former Greenhall High School site are set out at section 6. Turning to the recommendations, can I particularly draw your attention to the 6th bullet point, the recommendation to progress with option B. And this is in line with the recommendation from the recent seminar which you approved a few minutes ago. And finally, I'd say that we've got a range of officers within the Chamber today who are able to deal with the various technical and other aspects of the report.
Councillor Thompson.
I'll be fairly brief, Provost. We had a good discussion at this at the seminar we had. Excuse me. And I think there was a general agreement about the position we're in, and a sort of a general feel that the sort of direction we want to travel in is one that we're all talking the same language on. Obviously, there are options about what we could do with the site. If we sell it, there's issues around that, but very much came to the position that this site has got council houses on it. The Green Hall site had always been intended at some point in a phase to have council houses on it. So ultimately, had this not happened, both of these sites would have had council housing on them. So from that point of view, very happy that there was a sort of general level agreement on support that we retain this site within the council's portfolio, and that ultimately in time that there will again be council housing built on the site. Obviously there are very detailed engineering and technical reports around this to make sure that when the site is at some point in the future brought back, that it is safe, secure, and that we don't have a reoccurrence of the incident that's happened just now. But what I would say is obviously, well, it's clearly been very distressing for the individuals living in the state at Newbyre just now. We very much appreciate the patience that they've had in working with us and getting to a solution to move forward here. It's not been easy, we know that. It could never be easy for anyone to be in that situation, but obviously there has been a concerted effort on a part of many people within the council to make sure that has been worked through as much as we possibly could, to give as much support as we could. So, yeah, moving forward, I think obviously there are other avenues that we do continue to need to keep open, but that's something that will deal with itself in the course of time regards insurance and claims and that sort of stuff. I don't think that's not a discussion for today. For today, it's about looking at what we're doing with this site going forward to make sure that we continue to work with the families who have been affected by this, and to ensure that there are suitable alternative accommodations there for them, to move forward with the designs for the Green Hall site, and to look to option B as the ultimate future for this site, and to finally move on from the situation that's arisen.
Councillor Dyke, did you want to come in? No? Did you want to come in, Councillor Dyke? Yeah.
I have said in the past that I'm just concerned that if we do knock down all the houses, that we will incur a potential liability that a subsequent person or company that has to pay for all the damage done would claim that we have been unwise to do this, and I'm still not comfortable that we really have looked into that aspect, and I would much rather find us spending a little bit more time on making sure that we are not burning the bridges behind us.
Any other? Councillor Thompson.
Just on that, I mean, I know I can't remember exactly which paragraph it is within here, but we have taken advice both from Council's legal advisors and external legal advice, which says we would be acting entirely reasonably were we to take the action to demolish. I can't remember the exact paragraph, but it's certainly in there somewhere.
Mr. Lawley.
And the paragraph is 2.11, which sets out the legal position, and the insurance position is at 2.12. And of course, this was also a matter that came up at the audit committee, and I think a rather fuller answer was given on that occasion.
Councillor Muirhead.
Provost, thanks. Unfortunately, due to a family illness, I was unable to attend the seminar, but I did receive a briefing of the relevant officers following it, and I'm fairly comfortable with the discussions and conclusions that the seminar, or recommendations that the seminar have made to the Council today. My particular concern is about the Green Hall site, and Councillor Thompson makes reference to the commending the patience of the people involved, and the folk in that area have undergone extreme stress over a long period of time regarding the dangerous situation, the potentially dangerous situation that they're in. And it's really important that we move as quickly as we can to get a resolution. And I've got to commend the efforts, housing in particular, in terms of getting on and moving people. And I think that a good job of work's been done there. We did say at the outset that we were talking about December to have them done. That was probably quite ambitious, I think, and just with the sort of turnover that we've got. But to have almost half, and that's according to this, it's maybe moved on a wee bit since, but to have half the people out already, and a number of them into settled accommodation, which I think is good, because that means that they've not got that thought of that additional move later on to come. But a significant amount of people have elected, understandably, given that they're in what are virtually brand new council houses, nice areas, to go to another new build site. And I think it's really important that we press ahead with that as soon as possible. And I raised with the officers that I spoke to my concerns that there seemed to be very little having progressed from when we took the decision in June to try and bring that forward. You know, we're still not in planning and things like that. I've been assured that things have been moving on in the background. But what I would like to see is quite a definitive plan published to us, and more importantly, to the tenants, that says, here's the timescale. You know, what do you call it? The planner, a sort of plan going forward, and all the target times and what we expect to actually happen, to put people's mind at rest. If it's going to be longer than they would like, then there's probably nothing we can do about that, but it's important that they know, because people have been coming to me quite a lot and asking me, you know, what's happening with Green Hall? We've not seen anything. Can you even give me a look at a plan? Now, I realise there's a plan on the attached paperwork here. Not very easy to read, I've got to say. It's not particularly great, a great copy, but it would be handy to be able to let people have a look at that. But more importantly, have an indication of the timescales for Green Hall coming on stream. There was something, by the way, I think the word in one of the paragraphs on page 109 here on the report for the seminar alarmed me, because it kind of infers, however, a number of tenants had already made previous permanent move to preferred choice of alternative housing, either within Gorebridge or elsewhere in Midlothian. It did not appear that a new build development in Green Hall would be required to accommodate. It kind of reads that we're not going ahead with Green Hall, which quite clearly that isn't the case. But anyway, I think a timetable would be really helpful for us, but in particular for the people that are sitting waiting to go to that site.
Okay.
Thanks, Provost. In terms of a programme and a timescale, I'll endeavour to pull that to a conclusion and get that information out to the tenants who still are in situ. I believe copies of the report and the plan that's contained here have been issued to tenants at present. Understandably, it's on a small scale for this report. Larger copies of that can be made available. I'm happy to take you through the detail of that at any time. and indeed issue that and put that on display when it's appropriate.
Sorry, I'm not being picky, but you said issue it to the tenants that are still in situ. Obviously, the tenants that have moved into temporary accommodation, because quite a lot of them have, they'll all need to see. Anybody that's going to Green Hall, it would be helpful if they could get that.
Just for clarity for Councillor Muirhead, all tenants, those who've been decanted as well as those who remain on site, have had a copy of the report.
Okay. Okay, thank you for your time this afternoon. That's us closed.